South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has been entangled in a scandal that started in 2020 with the theft of cash that robbers found packed into a sofa at his game farm in Limpopo. But it seems the president has been cleared for his role in the scandal that became known as Farmgate. South Africa's anti-corruption watchdog, the Public Protector, cleared the president of any wrongdoing in a preliminary report into a cover-up scandal that has tarnished his reputation. The Public Protector said it has notified implicated parties of the preliminary findings of its probe over the theft of large amounts of cash from Ramaphosa's luxury farm. Joining me in the square today to get into the issues around this, I have Zama Ntshona. He's the spokesperson for the African Transformation Movement, ATM, and he joins us from Eastern Cape in South Africa. I also have Benedict Phiri, legal analyst for Jurisprudentia Specialist Council, who joins us from Johannesburg, South Africa. Zama and Benedict, gentlemen, welcome to Village Square Africa.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I want to start by taking a bit of a step back in terms of this scandal that has brought us to this situation. Now, the president has always denied any wrongdoing, and now the Public Protector's preliminary report has cleared him. The president was accused of failing to report the matter to the police, as well as abusing his powers and exposing himself to conflict of interest. And all of this involved between $580,000 and $5 million of foreign currency that was hidden at his private game farm. So let's start with this. In retrospect, did this situation warrant the level of scrutiny and investigation that it has received? Benedict, let me start with you.
Believe that this situation did warrant the level of scrutiny that it has received. I think it is a big thing in a constitutional democracy for a president to be accused of doing paid work when the Constitution and his oath of office specifically prohibits him from doing that. Also, because there were allegations that anti-corruption laws were violated in the process, it is a big thing for a president to be implicated in potentially violating anti-corruption laws in a country. I think that goes directly to the rule of law. So I think, overall, it was a big issue, and it does merit all the attention it has been getting, and probably even more through hopefully further parliamentary processes that may be undertaken by members of parliament.
Zama, do you agree with Benedict? Should we have seen this level of scrutiny, conversation, headlines, and at the very heart of it, investigations and probes into the president's conduct involving the theft at his farm?
Almost definitely. When you look at the violations of the Section 96 subsection 2A, 2B, conflict of interest, the violation of PRECA Act, subsection 34, section 34, subsection 1, and you have not included issues around foreign exchange, have not included issues around tax evasion. The number one statesman, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, must model a character that would inspire most South Africans to be law-abiding citizens. And unfortunately, as we speak right now, with this Phala Phala scandal, we can't say that the president has actually been able to model that kind of a character. And therefore, we believe as the African Transformation Movement that it was necessary. And everything that is still going to go on as far as this issue is concerned, it is required. It is a standard required. Even the drafters of the Constitution or the architects of our democracy saw it fit as one of the requisites for a president to stand, that the president must also be a president that will uphold one of many, the Executive Members Ethics Act.
And we're going to get into sort of this modeling of a character that inspires South Africans later on when we talk about the ANC. But let's also take that step back again. So there is an independent panel that was set up, appointed by the Speaker of South Africa's Parliament in November. And that panel found preliminary evidence that the president violated his oath of office, and he did have some sort of case to answer. Findings that could have also led to his possible impeachment, but we didn't see that actually happen. But now the president has been cleared. Is this a situation of the evidence possibly not stacking up when it's subjected to maybe a higher standard or a higher situation of cause before you can pronounce guilt? Is this a situation where we see the evidence not stacking up? What evidence do you even think the Public protector would have used to arrive at its conclusion, clearing the president. Zama, I'll go back to you with this.
I do not believe so. Do not believe so at all. First, look at the composition of those who sat for the Section 89 committee. You say you have a former Chief Justice, you have a senior judge and a senior counsel, and these people have no career ambition. You may say that is neither here nor there, but it is important for me to just mention that as I'm going to the next issue. Now, Section 96, subsection 2A of the Constitution, it says, members of the cabinet, the president included, shall not have other paid work. And when the president was closing the Limpopo conference, he said, I am a farmer, I sell animals, and the proceeds from my farm were from a game sale. Now, you do not only have a confession. No, you do not only have an allegation, but you have a confession. The president goes on to say, some of you here are actually individuals who are my customers, admitting that he is embarking on a process of paid work. And not only that, one important factor to consider, I'm trying to prove that it is not a question of evidence that is inadequate, and therefore when subjected to a higher standard, it frickles out. No. And when, another issue to raise is that Phala Phala, it is now public knowledge that it is a close cooperation with only one individual who owns it, the president. So the president can claim not to have direct benefit when that business is profitable. So I'm trying to say that it is not a question of that. And we have not seen as the African Transformation Movement how, contrary to the Section 89 committee that found that the president has something to answer, how the public protector would actually leave the admission, public admission of the president on the issue of other paid work. Second issue, the issue of PRECA, Act Chapter 34, subsection 1, on the issue of reporting. The president writes in his Twitter handle that he did not report to a DPCI office as required. He actually instructed his head of protection unit to actually go and investigate the matter. Now, when you read PRECA Section 34, subsection 1, it is very clear on one of the issues you should report as far as criminality is concerned, it says theft. Now, with this admission of the president, why would a public protector find differently from a Section 89 committee that says there was prima facie evidence, even with this one, that the president must answer? The third issue to raise is the issue of a conflict of interest. No one can run away from the fact that when the president issued an instruction to General Rhoda that he must go to a private farm. Now, also important to note, Phala Phala was not declared a national key point. So there was no breach of security when this actually happened. It was a normal theft in a private business. So when the president gave an instruction to General Rhoda to actually investigate, he was giving General Rhoda that instruction as who? The president or the businessman. And what allegiance is there for General Rhoda to private business? This is where we say conflict of interest and an overreach, issuing of an unlawful instruction. So we feel as the African Transformation Movement that the four issues that we raised with the public protector still stand. The four issues that we raised with the Section 89 committee still stand. And therefore, the public protector must go to town in trying to convince us that the admissions, the public admissions of the president are irrelevant, and therefore the president is exonerated.
So, Benedict, you've heard what Zama has listed, and of course, this result has not gone down with everyone very well. The Economic Freedom Fighters has said this exoneration of the president is nonsensical and basically thrown it in the dust. But looking at the issues that were primarily raised with the very first panel, and that's the Section 89 panel, and then the results we're getting from the public protector, do you think there's a disconnect in possibly maybe not necessarily the investigation, but in the terms of how it was investigated and what the burden of proof or the standard for evidence might have been?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is part of the problem that was always going to lead to different results or outcomes from these two bodies. The Section 89 panel was limited in its ability to call for documentation from other people, to cross-examine witnesses or interview them and take affidavits on oath, etc. So from a Section 89 panel perspective, the quality of the evidence that they had, was largely untested, but the terms of the Section 89 committee allowed it to make the finding that it made based on the submissions that it received from mainly or only members of parliament at that particular stage. The public protector has at least been able to request for information from a whole lot more parties than what members of parliament would have submitted to the Section 89 panel, and in a legal way. So it has tried to reach out to the South African Reserve Bank, tried to reach out to the South African Reserve, the fiscal services, tried to reach out to the Financial Intelligence Center, and got no assistance from them, but largely based her report on what the president said, together with the people that were around the president at the time of the commission of this offense. I don't think, though, that what has led to the divergence is the difference in the test of the evidence or the quality of the evidence. I think that the public protector has misapplied herself in the legal definitions for what should constitute some of the areas that were complained about. So, for instance, if we take the question of whether the president was undertaking paid work, the public protector was very clear that she would take a narrow approach to that. And the only way she would really prove that is if the president had a contract of employment with his own business. I think that seems very ridiculous if you look at the substance of what's actually happening. The public protector elevated form over substance, and unrightfully and unjustifiably so, because the public protector is the president is the sole owner of that close corporation. He's the one that's responsible for its affairs and is the only shareholder. So for him to say that he doesn't run that close corporation actually doesn't make sense at all. And for the public protector not to be able to call for financial statements that actually show the extent of the financial interest, I think doesn't do justice to the depth that was required by her investigation in this respect. Similarly, if you talk about the question of whether the president failed to resolve the conflict of interest, I think it's quite clear that the moment that General Rueda begins to investigate or take any actions in respect of Phala Phala, that would already expose the president to a potential conflict of interest, because that's his personal private interests, which are being protected or investigated at the behest of state resources. And I think the way that the public protector got to her finding would not really stand up to legal scrutiny if it was reviewed subsequently.
So I like the fact you take me to sort of those around the president, because let's go to that. It's interesting that the president is cleared, but as of right now, because it's a preliminary report, those who might have also been involved have not necessarily been cleared. So the report from the public protector exonerates the president, but says that the head of the Presidential Protection Unit, to whom the president reported the crime, acted improperly, and Zama has alluded to this, by investigating the case directly instead of reporting it to the police. So who else is implicated? And who else really has to wait to know their fate when it comes to this report? Because Zama, in terms of this, if a president is telling me about a theft in his private farm, there's sort of an implied understanding that I would first investigate quietly before I make it public. You sort of investigate to keep the things down. But he's going to possibly say, or he has said, that it's not that the president directed him to not report to the police, but that's just how he acted. Is he safe when we look at how this report is panning out? Zama?
It's going to be interesting. When you walk into your house and you find your TV missing, or maybe all the other goods, you think of the police. How much more when you get into your house and you find that there is $580,000 that is missing, don't you think that it is logical and normal that you would want to get the police involved so that you are able to deal with this matter? So it doesn't make sense that the president wouldn't see. In fact, with these actions, he passed a motion of no confidence on his own army of police, because it seems as if he did not trust his army of police. And just imagine, the president could have gotten the best investigators. The president could have got, he is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of this country. Even the army would have come out for him to actually deal with this particular issue, to find who dares to touch the president. But the president decides, with all that is at his disposal, with all that he could have gotten. I mean, recently there was a army routine that was done somewhere where the South African team scored very high. We have very capable individuals who could have assisted the president. But the important question is, why did the president not make use of what is readily available at his disposal, so that these culprits may be brought to book and this issue rested? We wouldn't be talking about this if it was not that. The second issue to raise, even if it is inferred that by talking to this individual, then this individual is going to go to the police and tell. 2 years later, there was no case number. There was no reporting. And yet, there were endless actions that were taken using the resources of the state. So now, as an individual who lost this amount of money, don't you want at some stage to know what happened to the case? In fact, you know what happened, because a revelation proves that these people were taken at some stage and taken to the private farm of the president, as according to reports that we have seen. Now, do you want to plead that you did not know anything? These people were just acting on their own accord? No, it cannot fly. This is why, as the African Transformation Movement, one of the things that we did, we wrote to IPED and we said, investigate every policeman that was involved in this, every individual was informed of this, every individual who signed off a grabber, a helicopter, a vehicle, who signed off a trip, those individuals must be investigated, because we believe that it is not only a question of the president who actually did this by overreach or abusing his power, but also those in controls, those responsible to look after state resources in the SAPS should have known better.
Okay, so Benedict, this is a preliminary report and the police are still investigating. Detectives say that they have in fact collected more than 120 statements as part of their investigations into this matter. But we now have the preliminary aspect of the report, which is clearing President Cyril Ramaphosa. So do you think this is the end of the matter for the president? Does it bring these official sort of investigations on this issue against him to an end?
Certainly, it's not the end of the matter, because as you've mentioned, the police are still investigating, and the outcome of their investigations may be very different from the public protector's investigation. The public protector was looking at quite a limited aspect of this matter. She was looking at essentially breaches of the executive ethics code and whether the president failed to uphold the constitution or the law. She's not looking at criminal consequences of the matter. She's also not looking at whether South Africa's exchange control regulations relating to the bringing in of foreign currency were breached. She's not looking at whether South African tax laws were breached. So there's a number of other parties and bodies that are investigating different aspects of this particular matter. And I'm pretty sure that at least some of the members of parliament may want to move under the parliamentary processes for maybe an ad hoc committee or, so I certainly do not think that this is the end of the matter for the president. And let's not forget that he still has to decide whether he's going to review the report of the Section 89 panel, since the Constitutional Court did not allow him direct access. So the outcome of that may also determine where some of these matters go, at least in a parliamentary perspective. So it's certainly not the end of the matter for the president. I think we'll see what the final report looks like. I'm pretty sure that there are some parties that will review it if it looks anyway like the interim report, and certainly we'll await the outcome of some of the other investigations that haven't been completed around this matter as well.
All right, so Benedict, Zama, we're going to take a quick time out. So when we come back, we'll widen this conversation to also look at the ramifications for the African National Congress, that's the president's party, and what impacts it could have on the president's potential for being re-elected in elections that are coming soon. This is the Village Square Africa, and we're looking at President Ramaphosa being cleared by a preliminary report into the Phala Phala Farmgate scandal. Do stay with us. My guests today on the square are Zama Ntshona, spokesperson for the African Transformation Movement, and Benedict Piri, legal analyst, Jurisprudentia Specialist Counsel. And they join me to look at President Ramaphosa being cleared by the anti-corruption watchdog in the country. Zama, I want to look at something else, because earlier on in asking one of my questions, you mentioned that the president should model a character that would inspire South Africans. Now, President Ramaphosa pledged to tackle corruption when he assumed office, but he himself found himself mired in a corruption scandal of his own. Let's not also forget that the Zondo Commission handed the state capture reports over to him, which indicted the Jacob Zuma administration, of which he was also part. So while he has been cleared, does the president still have this shadow of corruption hovering over him?
Most definitely. The shadow is going to remain as long as the president wants to evade accountability. Even if this particular report, upon its finalization, the public protector may find that the president is actually maybe exonerated, not guilty. But many reports and remedial actions of the public protector have been taken for review. And count on this one, even this one. In the event that the public protector finds that the president is not guilty of the violations of the Executive Members Act, Ethics Act and the said sections, it is likely, highly likely, that the matter will be taken to the court of the land. And he will, even if it would happen miraculously that the ANC emerges next year and they actually become the leader of society, this will forever be a cloud that hovers over his head, because suddenly, as the African Transformation Movement, we are not going to let this go. It is important that we hold the executive accountable. Zondo Commission report part 6 says, one of the problems that have always been, especially for the ruling party, is the issue of parliament disenabled to hold the executive accountable. And also, when you look at how things have been going, you can definitely see that there has been an intentional, for instance, look at how when we were voting for the establishment of an impeachment process, there was a meeting of the NEC of the ruling party. That meeting directed people how to vote. In fact, those who were voting, they were voting with almost a gun on their heads, because they were told, if you do not toe the line, you can just resign. You can just pack your bags and leave. In fact, there was a threat to livelihoods and there was a threat to lives. So that is how they operate. But as the African Transformation Movement, we're not going to be intimidated by that. The president will be held accountable, even if the public protector exonerates the president.
So, Benedict, let me pick up from that. So where do we find this accountability if the public protector exonerates the president? Because you mentioned the fact that there are still a number of ongoing investigations. There are a number of interested parties that could, of course, and that are basically involved in all of this. But there's the fear that the smaller fish at the lower end of the ladder will get caught up in the nets. But if there is some form of guilt and some form of accountability to be meted out on the president, he may escape that. Is there any other alternative to hold him accountable other than this process right now, which is being led by the public protector?
I certainly think if you have, for instance, the South African Reserve Bank make an adverse finding against the president with respect to his conduct here, or if the Hawks decide that he actually is a suspect for a crime of some sort, then I think you will see that people like Vuyo and other parties in Parliament may, for instance, want to bring a motion of no confidence in the president, or establish certain committees to look at this matter in greater depth. Obviously, the problem is that the ANC has the majority in Parliament at the moment and can block measures that are aimed at holding the president accountable, which in a way you can argue is what they did in the non-adoption of the Section 89 panel report. But we know that the Constitutional Court has ruled on a number of occasions at how important it is that Parliament can hold members of the executive and the president to account and must ensure that its measures and its processes are in such a way that members of the cabinet can be held to account and Parliament can be seen not to be derogating from their duty. So I think, if anything, this process has taken us a lot further down the line on presidential accountability. We are at least one step further down the line than where we got to with former President Zuma. And certainly, I think we'll see as the matter unfolds a strengthening of Parliament's ability to hold the executive and the president in particular more accountable. So maybe the president might escape this one, but certainly it won't be the same for his predecessors down the line, because as we're going along, the mechanisms to hold the executive accountable are being strengthened, which I think is a good thing ultimately.
So, Benedict, let's stick with the ANC. So the president's party, the African National Congress, has struggled in the past several years with corruption issues. And the president has generally insisted that any party official accused of corruption leave office pending investigations, the step-aside rule. And we've seen how that played out with the Ace Magashule situation. Even he was said to be feeling the pressure to also hand over to his deputy pending the outcome of the investigation. But the president didn't do that. When you look at what the president has done in his actions in this situation, even outside of the scandal that happened on the farm, and also looking at the ANC's challenges and struggles around corruption, what do you think South Africans themselves are feeling about the ANC's potential to lead them to a corruption-free South Africa, or at least to minimize the effects and the impact of corruption on South Africa, which is felt very heavily? Again, referencing the Zondo Commission's report on state capture under the Jacob Zuma administration, which is still being felt till now.
I can talk to how I'm feeling. I think, personally, given the matters that we deal with and our interaction with the courts and some of matters like this, including the exercise of public power and administrative action, I think there's certainly a dearth of ethical leadership in this country, and certainly it does stem from the ANC. And, I think that's the first and foremost. And, you've heard the Constitutional Court speak about how much of a cancer corruption is and how it robs citizens of their ability to exercise and freely express their rights that they've been given by the Constitution. So I think what is happening here, and what the Zondo Commission has also illustrated, is that there's an ongoing lethargy about elevating the quality of leadership within the ANC and within the country as a whole. And the impact of that is that South Africans are unable to fully exercise their constitutional rights. In fact, they are being eroded to a large degree. People do not have electricity, and that impacts on their ability to start businesses, to access healthcare and education services, etc. And you cannot say that you cannot put the electricity crisis in this country on the doorsteps of the ANC. So I think it is a negative impact and a very serious one. And I think as South Africans, we are deeply disappointed by the inability of the ANC to have capable, ethical leaders that can actually lead the ANC and the country in a lawful and ethical way.
Zama, I'll ask you the same thing, but in a slightly different way. Do you think, coming from the end of Benedict's answer, do you think South Africans believe that the ANC can lead it to where it needs to go. It's likely going to be a challenge for the president and the ANC to retain power in the coming general elections. And he came very close to being impeached, and he came also probably very close to not getting the party leadership in the conference that held in December 2022. Do you think we see South Africans starting to take sort of the blinders off when it comes to the ANC and its purported fights against corruption, as well as the president's purported fights against corruption?
Almost definitely. The people of South Africa, you can definitely see that they have now moved away from the times when they believed that the only leader of society is the African National Congress. You can see also in how people start leading revolutions on their own, away from the African National Congress. They are tired of contesting for what should be done that is right when they see that there is an intentional declaration of a state of paralysis for this country. Because tell me, how, on the issue of electricity, for instance, how do you increase demand without increasing generation capacity? I mean, there's a standard. How do you increase demand without increasing generation capacity when you know that the electricity grid that was there was designed for a few? You know, so we can't really take this issue away from how bad the African National Congress has been when it comes to the vision of a South Africa that is fully run. Let's take the murder rate. The murder rate is at 74 murders a day in South Africa. Only 5 years ago, it was 58 murders, and it was bad at 58. You would swear that the war between Russia and Ukraine is fought in South Africa, because before the end of business day today, 74 body bags would be carrying people here in South Africa. You look at those and a countless number of other challenges that we face. People have now gotten to a point where they say it is clear that the African National Congress has no intention and also does not have the political will to actually address the fundamental issues of the people of this country that are affecting the people of this country. This is why you have even found newer parties who have said advocacy under the banner of the African National Congress is no longer an option. And you find South Africans moving away and voting contrary to the African National Congress. That on its own is a vote of no confidence on the African National Congress.
So some have said that we tend to have short-term memories across the continent when it comes to our politicians, and we can have these scandals come up a year to elections, but these same politicians possibly win elections again, or we don't continue to keep these issues on the front burner. So gentlemen, as we finish this conversation today, a very simple question I want to ask you. Benedict, I'll start with you first. What impact do you think the whole probe, the allegations, the investigation, yes, he has been cleared, but what impact, what lasting impact do you think this could have on the president's presidency, as well as his chances of securing a second term when the elections happen?
Well, I think that's a really tough question for me as a legal analyst. But if I may venture, I think it's certainly going to be a little bit more difficult for the ANC. It has been more difficult over recent elections. And I think it's not guaranteed that the president may be in that presidential position, just given even the politics within the ANC, and some of his detractors may actually want to utilize what comes out of this Phala Phala, process against him, and certainly they will utilize it against. So I think it has definitely weakened him. I think he did consolidate power in December at the party conference, but he's not as strong as he could be, and there definitely are threats to his continuing presidency as a result of this, and I think just his general leadership of the country as a whole.
So let me just sneak this in. In terms of timelines, Benedict, what should we be expecting next? This is the preliminary reports now. What are the next steps that we should anticipate from the public protector in this regard?
So the parties or the interested parties have been given an ability to comment on this interim report over the next 10 days. The public protector will then collate those reports and make further inputs into her final report. It's a bit hard to predict when the final report may be. Even this interim report took a lot longer than what was legislated in the law, but the public protector, typically does take a lot longer than is required. So not sure when the final report may come out. I think it'll have to do with the depth of the submissions that she receives. I think we do wait with bated breath for the outcome of the South African Reserve Bank investigation as well. We're not sure when that would come out, and also confirmation from the police as to what they will do with whether they will charge anybody around Phala Phala. And so I'm imagining over the next 2 to 3 months, we may still be seeing developments in this matter, but hard to call given the slow pace at which all of these institutions typically approach their matters.
All right, thank you so much, Benedict. And Zama, before I wrap up, my simple question to you, what impact do you think this would have on President Cyril Ramaphosa's legacy, as well as his attempts to return as president in the coming elections?
I think in general, South Africans expected much more from the president. You would remember that the president has been is one of the architects of the new democracy. You would remember in the times of Codesa, the president was there. You would remember that not only that, the president, during the times of the negotiations, he was one of the individuals, the drafters of the constitution, the president has been there. So people have placed him on a high pedestal, expecting that if there is one individual who can actually change the fortunes of this country, it would have been him. But now the reality of the matter is that it seems as if it is not only just certain individuals within the African National Congress who are actually tainted, but it seems as if the rot is deep and it goes from one generation to the other. And it seems as if we are getting to a point where we are going to get to a point where if they remain in power, the challenges that we find within our society, they may never go away. We know that patronage politics is at the center of the politics of the African National Congress. You would also remember that when you look at the challenges they are faced with, even today, we do not know who funded President Ramaphosa. And we do not know how he is repaying those individuals who he funded. So as the African Transformation Movement, we believe that the time has come for the South African society to start reimagining leadership. And that leadership must be a leadership away from the African National Congress.
All right, gentlemen, on that note, we'll end this conversation. But as Benedict pointed out, there are a number of interested parties, implicated parties, and ongoing investigations. So it is one that will definitely be touching base with you again. Thank you so much. Benedict Piri, legal analyst for Use Prudential Special Counsel, as well as Zama Ntshona, spokesperson for the African Transformation Movement. Thank you for joining me on Africa's Square.
Thank you.
And it's a wrap on the conversation. But while it seems that President Cyril Ramaphosa may have a bit of respite with this clearing from the preliminary report of the public protector, there are a number of other investigations that are also still looking into the Phala Phala Farmgate scandal. Could this respite be temporary, or could it eventually be long-term? And of course, the implications for his presidency and his potential to win re-election when South Africans go to the polls in the upcoming general elections. How much of a shadow will this scandal cast on his presidency, his legacy, and his ability to return to power? It's a conversation that we will be having right here on Village Square Africa. Thank you once again for joining me. I'm Tolulokwe Adeleru Balogun, sitting in for Kamini Amanor. She will return as soon as possible. But of course, don't forget to stay with us right here on News Central, where we keep Africa first.